Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I hope you're doing really well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. And I just hope you're going to go and get yourself something lovely to drink, because I'm looking forward to you joining me for a lovely story tonight, which is part 2 of our story. So if you haven't heard part 1, click on the description, because you really don't want to miss out. So let's continue with part 2 of our story. Robert watched his wife bursting into uncontrollable sobs. There was no comforting her. She was inconsolable with grief. His heart broke for her. He couldn't imagine how frightening it was for her to see her beloved son coming so tragically close to losing his life. It was every parent's worst nightmare. He could see that his wife was replaying the event over and over again in her head like a broken record, blaming herself for what had happened. He knew he had to take some level of responsibility for what had occurred. He regretted removing the training wheels from his son's bicycle, but he had never anticipated this happening. He thought he had got through to his son about the perils of driving on the road, but his son had not paid any attention to his sagacious advice. But to be fair, he was only 5 years old, and although he seemed as bright as a button, he was still incredibly naive, which you would expect from a kid of Oliver's age. He affectionately cradled his wife in his arms, rocking her very gently like a baby backwards and forwards, kissing her long chestnut brown hair. "It's going to be all right, I promise you," he told her. "All I can say is thank God our son is all right and that he was wearing his helmet. Where is he now?" "I've sedated him. I sent him to bed. He's in a terrible state, a delayed reaction, I think. Even in his young age, he knows he came close to losing his life. At first, it was just a big joke to him. He even pretended to be dead when he was lying on the road. But I think it's finally got through to him that this is no laughing matter, when he realized that if he hadn't been wearing that helmet of his, he might not be here, and I think that came as quite a shock to him, and a big wake-up call. He's also upset his bike is completely ruined, and he's asking for another." "Well, I think we shan't be getting him another quite so quickly. We'll have to think about that. But I agree with you. Some drivers are treacherous on this street. But we don't have to move to Banff, you know. There are other quieter neighbourhoods in Montreal, where people walk their dogs and cars are not nearly as aggressive as they are here. We could move somewhere like that if you like, onto a street with traffic bumps in the middle of the road. Or we can bring our son's near escape from death to the attention of the council. For our borough, that is. Maybe they will finally listen to us for a change before they have a death on their hands. The speeding on this stretch of road is ludicrous. I've seen it myself." "Not a chance, sweetheart. I'm sorry. I've made up our minds. We're not staying here. We're moving to Banff. And you must give in your notice at work as soon as possible. We're going to be entrepreneurs in our new life. At least it will sort out the problem with my father." "What do you mean, the problem?" "Well, ever since Mum died, things have gone from bad to worse. Dad is so miserable these days without Mum. He's just sinking into a deep, lugubrious depression. I hasten to say the house is looking as bedraggled as it did when I was growing up as a girl. And the inside of the house is disordered and chaotic. It looks as if it's been hit by a tornado. I think when we move to Banff, he should move in with us. I can get his house fixed up for him and put on the market. I was hoping you could encourage him to see that there is life beyond a sofa and a television set and all the books he reads, and give him something to live for. Otherwise, he's quite literally going to waste away, curl up and die, and I couldn't bear to see that happen to him. I heard it happens to geese, you know. They stay together for life and are devoted to each other, and when one dies, the other follows close behind. That's what a broken heart does to you. I remember Mr. Miller had 2 geese. That's exactly what happened to the male after the female died. A week later, he found his healthy male goose dead. He said the male goose was so broken up about the female's demise. The poor thing was never the same again after his partner died. Dad is so much the same as that. He has a broken heart about losing my mother. And being lazy by nature doesn't do him any favours. It's only accelerating the chances of him either getting seriously sick or exiting this planet far too soon. I really don't want to lose my dad. The thought is just too dreadful. You're an influencer and shaker, Robert. You can show my father that even though Mum's gone, he does have something to live for. One thing about Banff, well, it's exquisite. There's the turquoise lakes like Lake Louise, prepossessing scenery that will steal your breath away. If you're miserable in a place like that is literally heaven on earth, then you've seriously got problems. I'm sure a place like that would be so good for my father. You really think that this is a good idea? Your father moving in with us, I mean. Well, it's either that, Robert, or much like my mother, he's going to an early grave. He's still not drinking any beer at all. And ever since Mum died, he's eaten practically nothing. He's wasting away. He's got so slender. My mother only died young because she ate herself to death consuming enough sugar to sink the Titanic. But it's not too late for my father. We can help him recover from his lugubrious melancholia and his grief. Besides, it's good for my dad to be around his grandson. He was always such a great reader. He's a wise, learned old soul. He can teach Oliver so much. Put it this way, I don't think my father would have been so quick to remove the training wheels from Oliver's bike like you did. I think he'd have known better. On the subject of Oliver, we'll have to get him a brand new bike, or we ain't going to hear the end of it. Despite his close call with death, he still wants another bike. That's resilience, believe me. You say that, sweetheart, because the real truth is you know your father would be far too lazy to remove those training wheels, said Robert, giving his wife a grin. Am I right, or am I right? Oh, right. I admit you have a point. Are we going to Banff or not? Is it agreed? Robert grinned at Carly with a smile so wide that his lips almost looked lopsided on one side of his face. You want to bet? I've always wanted to live in Banff. Do I look like I would look a gift horse in the mouth? You're the one who wanted to stay here in Montreal. Not me, I might add. I was the one that said I wanted to live a life surrounded by exquisite scenery. But you were scared I would become like your father, doing nothing. But that's not me. Money will never change me. It's a useful tool, and that's about it. I have no interest in fancy exotic trips to the Mediterranean, exclusive spa treatments, luxurious hotels. I'm a practical guy. A little luxury now and then is nice, but that's about it. I like simplicity most of the time, and I'm certainly not a jet-setter. Travelling the world, you know, is not it's all cracked up to be. It's far too overrated, in my opinion. I know it is, isn't it, Robert? But I do remember watching this programme once. The family made all their money from Johnson & Johnson. They were stinking rich. The father pottered around his house all day, painting pictures on an easel. The self-entitled son was so spoilt, so full of himself. It truly looked as if clover was growing out of his nostrils and ears. They had it all, but you know what? They had absolutely nothing. It was almost pitiful. It was like all the ambition that they could have procured in this lifetime to make something of their lives was gone because they didn't need to do it. And then you hear of people who come from poverty, who bust their guts to achieve their goals. And they're so accomplished and so fulfilled. So you see, Robert, sometimes inheriting wealth, when you have an aptitude for laziness like my father and mother did, is more than a curse than a blessing. My father's father knew that. He was right. I get where you're going with this, Carly, but I keep telling you that is not us. I still want to work in Banff, giving something back to the world, to the community. Your finances give us the freedom to do something that I love. That will make a difference. It's not about being lazy. Far from it, in fact. Your fears are unfounded. Our financial freedom will just give us choices. And that's all. Carly looked up to see her son Oliver standing in the kitchen. He was carrying his big blue octopus in his hands and looking at them with wide eyes. Mummy, my knee really hurts me. Of course it hurts, sweetheart. You grazed yourself badly today. If you read me a story, it might feel better, and some warm milk and cookies would be nice, and then my knee, it'll heal very fast. I know it will.
Hello, Sport. Are you going to give your father a hug? I understand you had a bit of an accident today.
Dad, I went flying off my bike onto the sidewalk. I pretended to be dead. You should have seen Mummy's face. She was crying really badly. Then I felt bad because I gave her a scare. The lady from the street, she's got 2 black dogs with flat faces. She said the whole accident, the man that was driving the car, he didn't stop. The lady said he should be locked up into prison forever and ever, but they didn't get his number plates. She had clever doggies, Daddy, because they knew I'd been hurt. They were licking my knee better and my face. The lady said that my helmet that I wear on my head, that it definitely saved my life. I'm sorry, Daddy, but I didn't mean to cycle fast, but the bicycle wasn't slow without the training wheels.
I'm sorry, Sport. I should never have taken the training wheels off your bicycle, should I? But when it comes to your mother, it wasn't a nice thing to do, pretending to be dead. You gave your mother a big fright. You scared her half to death. And the truth is, you could have been killed today. You must never ride your bicycle on that road again, without being supervised. Do you understand?
But I can't anyway, Daddy. The mean man in the car, the one that ran me over or knocked over my bike, he drove into it. He destroyed my bike, Daddy, and now my bike is dead. The bicycle chain came off and the bicycle is all bent up.
Well, be glad that it was the bicycle that got harmed, and not you. I'm sure he didn't drive into you on purpose, Sport, but he was driving way too fast. He was being irresponsible. He probably did not see you on the road, which is why it's best you don't cycle down a dangerous road like that. It may look very peaceful and tranquil, there may not be very much traffic around, but it just takes one car to come driving down that road very fast, not looking where it's going, and trouble ensues. As I keep telling you, you need to be careful.
Robert knew if it wasn't for his 5-year-old son Oliver's serendipitous near-fatal run-in with that car, and the close call he had with death, moving to Banff would not be on the cards for their family, by any manner of means. Indeed, his wife Carly had insisted that they could think about such moves when they were of retirement age, but not now. It was almost like one domino came crashing down, and the others followed in sequence. And this turn of events was in no way negative, but he never expected it would be his 5-year-old son that would facilitate the family move to Pastures Green, by putting the fear of God into his wife, who believed the fortuitous accident was some kind of a sign from the gods warning them to leave Montreal, when in reality this accident could have happened in any neighbourhood, in any part of the world. Robert thought about the quirky woman at work, who was considered a bit of an oddball in the office. But for him, she was like a breath of fresh air. She was individualistic, nonconformist, rather eccentric. She had Romany origins and considered herself a gypsy, and was proud of her roots. She wore headscarves on her head every day, long bright skirts, crochet shawls, hundreds of gold bracelets and necklaces. She had nut-brown skin, long dark shiny hair, and very intense brown eyes that you could swear could look right through you like a voucher. She was very intimidating for a lot of people in the office, who found her stares quite uncomfortable. The woman claimed to read palms, tea leaves, and the tarot, and one day she caused quite a stir in the office, when she actually brought a crystal ball along to work. People in the office preferred to ignore her, and only gave her attention when her predictions started to come true. She told one lady in the office who was spending a fortune on IVF treatments to fall pregnant not to bother, because she'd have a baby naturally the following year, and it would be a boy. So she didn't need to engage in any fertility treatments, and sure enough that's exactly what happened. So in a moment of boredom, Robert asked her if she saw anything in his tarot cards,
and was amazed when she told him she saw him moving away. "I wish," he had grimaced to her, looking at her wistfully. "I'm afraid it's not going to happen," he insisted. "It's not from want of trying, but the lady's not for changing her mind. My wife is mulishly stubborn about such things."
Janice lifted up the tower card and showed it to Robert. He squirmed at the sight of such a horrifying card. He saw a tall tower with people flying out of it that made him think of the Twin Towers tragedy in New York. Then this was followed by the death card that wasn't good. It looked very ominous. She had laughed. "Don't get anxious, Robert. It's nothing bad. The cards just say your life, as you know it, is going to come tumbling down like the tower here. The death card means the birth of a brand new beginning, the end of an old cycle. I think you must be moving away from your life here in Montreal, going somewhere different, where you're going to be much happier than you are now. I see your dreams being fulfilled. You have the 10 of Pentacles here, followed by the Sun card. It's looking good for you, Robert. Very good." Robert was rather encouraged by the reading with Janice, but he suspected it was all stuff and nonsense, really, not to be taken seriously. So what if she'd been accurate in her predictions about Sally Roper's baby and Robert Morrison's marriage when the man hadn't even started dating his betrothed at the time? Besides, did he really believe in the tarot? No, of course not. But it was nice to dream. All he could think of now was moving to Banff. He adored that part of the world, and the moment he first laid eyes on Lake Louise, he knew he wanted to live in this part of the world more than anything else. The water in that lake had been turquoise, and he'd never seen anything more prepossessing in his entire life. He left the office that day with a significant spring in his step, thinking about Janice's predictions for his future. Could he dare to hope that his family would one day move to Banff? It seemed like such an unattainable pipe dream. He thought he'd slipped into an alternative universe when he arrived home to find his wife wanted to move to Banff. What were the chances of that? He'd never envisaged it happening in all the months of Sundays put together. God never normally heard his prayers when he'd begged him about the matter for the last 5 years or so. Now it was happening, and it seemed so surreal, far too surreal to digest, as if he was sure he'd been dreaming. But no, it really was happening against all the odds. The family, his family, was moving to Banff. Furthermore, it was his wife that was insistent about the move, not him, almost as if a veil had been lifted from her eyes, and she was seeing their lives through a completely different lens. It wouldn't be so great having Carly's father moving in with them. A bit of an imposition, perhaps. But to give him his due, he was an eccentric man with a great sense of humour. If Carly's father, Chuck, had his way, he'd probably just curl up and die. He'd been hopelessly in love with his wife when she was alive, and finally when she was gone, it would seem something inside him broke. Carly was right. If her father did not move in with them, he probably would die in the next 6 months or so, of a broken heart. He was failing to take better care of himself. If having the father-in-law moving in with them to their brand new home in Banff was what was on the cards, it certainly was a small price to pay, to wake up to those prepossessing views every day of the week. Maybe he'd get involved in the tourist industry, offering people hiking expeditions in the countryside. He'd think about it. He knew that Carly was terrified that with her hefty bank balance, that she and Robert would follow in her parents' footsteps and become lazy slobs. But that would never happen. They weren't naturally lazy as a couple, and they loved to embrace an adventurous lifestyle, and doing nothing was not in their DNA. Robert had loathed his job at the office, working for a drudgerous accounting company that was privately owned in Montreal, and spending his days behind a computer, staring at the bleak, oppressive, joyless white wall, along with an old calendar that had not been removed for over 5 years, thanks to 50-year-old Doreen Douglas. She had hung the hunky fireman's calendar on the wall, and loved to look at it every day of the week. It displayed 12 beefy, rather brawny-looking firemen, wearing no shirts and sitting on the backs of Harley-Davidsons or standing on the fire truck, in very suggestive poses with their bulking pecs. They were strapping, muscular, shredded men, for every single month of the year, and she was in love with Mr. April, So the calendar remained rigidly fixed on April, despite the fact that it was years out of date. And maybe Mr. April didn't look like that anymore. But try telling that to Doreen Douglas, who had been having an affair with Mr. April for 5 successive years. Only it was a love affair in her head, and she would stare at that calendar as if Mr. April was her long-lost love. Robert wished to God it wasn't on his wall next to his desk, but Doris didn't have a wall, so had borrowed his wall space, so she could view her fireman from the opposite side of the desk, where her computer was set up. Recently a new recruit whom arrived at the office, who was gay, had been given Robert the approving eye, and flirting outrageously with him. "I won't tell your wife if you don't," he had whispered to Robert in his ear. "I've been with many married men before. I'm very discreet, you know. Mum's the word. I find you very attractive, Robert. I don't believe in keeping my feelings contained. I wear my heart on my sleeve, you know. Just so you know, for the record, you've got excellent taste in men," he said, giving him a wink. "And by the way, just between you and me, I have a very similar tattoo on my derriere that you would love." "Sorry, what are you talking about?" Robert had asked. "I'm not gay. I'm happily married." The young man had tapped his nose as if to say he knew different. "You're very shy, Robert. How very sweet. I like it when my men are shy. Why are you acting so coy? There really is no need to be embarrassed," he said, pointing to the calendar with a huge grin on his face. "Oh, that," said Robert. "I might have known. That's not mine. It belongs to Doris over there. It's not my calendar. She's the one interested in the fireman with the big pecs and the cryptic tattoos. I'm not into that kind of thing. I like women." The new recruit looked disappointed. "Life's a bitch. Why do the best men have to be taken? Why do they have to not be gay? It's so not fair. Story of my life. I thought I was on to a winner with you, Robert." "Sorry, no can do," said Robert. The mood in that office, day in and day out, was depressing, and everyone couldn't wait for the dials on the clock to finally turn to the 5 o'clock marking. But that sometimes took an agonizing long time to happen. Then, like a flock of geese, everyone flew out of that office so fast. They were longing to return to their roosting places and cosy homes, gladdened that the drudgerous day was finally behind them. In truth, no one enjoyed working in that stuffy office, doing the same things day in and day out, like hamsters going around and around on a wheel. It was a dead-end job from which Robert and his business colleagues derived very little satisfaction, as all the challenging decisions in the job were made by the senior executives in the company. It was an unfair environment, where nepotism reigned supreme, so any promotions were kept strictly within the family. Even if the person in question was not qualified for the job, if they were associated with the Riley family, in one way or another they were crowned with a position of privilege and honour, even if they were completely incompetent. It had naturally meant anyone with the company with any aspiring ambitions had no chance of being promoted, unless they had a special connection with the Riley family, so people were naturally forever discouraged. Robert and his wife were financially free, which really was a blessing. Carly's father had given his wife and her brother a hefty chunk of their inheritance while he was alive, to save inheritance taxes, which was a clever thing to do. Robert had tried to persuade his wife Carly that with their financial freedom they could live anywhere in the world they wanted to. He had always dreamed of living in Banff, which was as picturesque as the views you'll see on a box of Swiss chocolates. But his wife had been against the idea, because of the fear of becoming like her parents and never doing a damn thing. It was a very real fear of his wife's, rooted from a childhood where she'd lived in a house that almost looked abandoned and derelict, because both of her parents had been too lazy to concern themselves with its general maintenance and upkeep. They just didn't bother, his wife had told him. It was so humiliating for us, because our house was the eyesore in the street, with knee-high grass, warped shutters, and me and my brother Larry felt very self-conscious about that. Don't get me wrong, my parents were wonderful people, but let's just say their lackadaisical approach towards life left much to be desired. 1 year later, Robert's account. Moving to Banff was the best decision my family could have ever made, and I knew what an immense privilege it was for us to live in such a prepossessing, idyllic part of the world. And its magic had even transformed my father-in-law Chuck from a broken man who had lost his will to live to someone who woke up with a spring in his step and a purpose in his heart every single day. He thoroughly enjoyed taking a stroll out of doors, which was something he hadn't done for over 50 long years. It was wonderful for Oliver to have his grandfather around, and the man could make you laugh so much that your belly would ache. He was a well-learned man who knew much about many things, and had taken on to helping Oliver read very eloquently for one so young. We moved to an exclusive neighbourhood called Bria, a stone's throw away from Whistler's village, referred to as the Sunridge Plateau. We moved into a sizable house with 6 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms that was perched on a 2,000 square foot lot. The house boasted 18-foot ceilings with salt stone walls that contained wood-burning and gas-assisted fireplaces, which people tend to like a great deal in Whistler, as it regulates the temperature, I'm told. When my wife's father moved in, I genuinely thought that the man was too set in his ways, and that it would take a herd of gallivanting bison to uproot him from the sofa, where he'd be seated for the lion's share of the day, watching television or reading books by a cosy fire. When he first agreed to move in, he was very reluctant and worried he'd be imposing on us, but we assured him that we would like him very much to live with us. In the beginning I thought we'd made a grievous mistake, inviting Chuck to move in, as my wife's father did nothing all day but fall asleep by the couch, barely moving a muscle. It was obvious that this man had become a shadow of his former self, but one day that all changed. So there we are. That's the end of part 2 of our story. It's getting very exciting. So I can't wait for you to join me tomorrow night for part 3. Until next time, goodbye and good night.